The Bruins are on the verge of a huge crystal ball and potential commit. But how has travel and Big Ten travel affected recruiting and overall performance on the field? Good and bad.
You are Locked On UCLA, your daily podcast on the UCLA Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to this edition of the Locked On UCLA podcast. I'm your host, Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer. Thanks for making this show your first listen each and every day. It's free wherever you get your podcast, and it's available on YouTube. Like, comment, subscribe, download. Thanks for your support. It's your team every day. Welcome back, everydayers. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Go check out FanDuel. And when we're getting started today, we're going to talk a little bit about a crystal ball. I've talked about this before, but now it's another outlet kind of confirming, although crystal balls are all but confirmed, but the thought that UCLA is right there in getting a 4-star offensive lineman, 6'5.5", Champ Smith, otherwise known as Micah Smith, from Vero Beach, Florida. On an episode back that I had on Memorial Day at the end of May, I had Brian Smith, the host of the Portal podcast, does a lot of recruiting updates, does a lot of NIL portal updates. And the big thing he was saying is, that's a big get for a UCLA team if they can secure him when they've struggled with offensive line recruiting in recent years. At the end of the Chip Kelly tenure, where UCLA went after the guys in the portal, Deshaun Foster and his team needing a little bit better offensive line play after his first year, the Bruins haven't been securing top-tier offensive linemen on a year-in, year-out basis. And if Champ Smith, who is now crystal ball to UCLA via 24/7 Sports, I talked about this about a week ago, where on 3, they talked about he was apparently a guy that's leaning UCLA Steve Wiltfong of On 3. Okay, UCLA might be getting this guy. And Brian Smith from our own Locked On Network was like, this is a dude. And for a UCLA team that is in a UCLA program that's battling Ohio State, battling Illinois, Alabama, Arkansas, you're going to go get a guy who can change your offensive line on day one. And as Brian Smith said, a plug-and-play guy. If you want to go back and listen to that episode, it was from May 26th, I believe. I put it up a couple of times on YouTube. We talked about this, going to get a guy like Micah Smith, who just had his official visit in the middle of May, and he's going to commit on June 7th. And if he chooses UCLA and holds to that commitment, whether it's an NIL contract signed before the official signing day or however it works to get these commitments, UCLA is winning if they can out-recruit or outmaneuver Ohio State, Alabama, Arkansas, Illinois for good reason in this Big Ten SEC West Coast recruiting battle for a kid in Florida, which makes it fascinating when we talk about Big Ten travel, right? What was the reasoning a lot for UCLA to get there? They wanted the national exposure, the idea of competing on the best stage, and then they want a lot of money. Let's be real. They wanted so much media rights money, the opportunity to grow forth from a crumbling conference that the Pac-12 was. USC was already making the move. It made sense that UCLA was like, all right, let's join this move and be a West Coast partner, eventually with Oregon and Washington. But UCLA and USC got a better part of the deal than their other 2 Pacific Northwest rivals. And with the expansion into super conference era, UCLA is going to have to travel just like USC, Oregon, Washington, all the way across the country to go play Rutgers and Maryland in conference matchups, all the way across the country to play Penn State. We know all these crazy matchups when now you see the baseball regional and all the NCAA is going to do is keep it local in the first couple of rounds as much as possible. And you saw UCLA run through a regional of Arizona State, UC Irvine, and Fresno State. All teams well within an hour flight or less than a 30-minute drive of some sort to get to Los Angeles. But when you're playing in conference play, UCLA is going across the country. And then when you play your regional, they're all teams that are in your own backyard. It seems a little backwards, but that's how it is. And how did it affect teams? I was reading an article from ESPN that went over this. It was written back near the end of May, Kyle Bonagura, if I'm saying that name correctly. And it talked about the problems with travel, right? We talk about football. Okay, those are chartered flights. All right, UCLA going to Penn State, UCLA going to Hawaii, going to Ohio State this year. Those are, from schedules from last year going to LSU, and then going to Ohio State this year. Those are chartered flights, and they can go fly across the country. And with relative ease, even at the FCS level, because I've gone and broadcast and travel with FCS teams too, it's relatively simple. You fly out the day before, you sleep, you eat, you play the game, there's a walkthrough, and you fly back, and you're back in your bed by Saturday night, Sunday morning, and it's like you weren't even gone. You could definitely feel it for maybe a day or two with the air miles. You'll definitely be a little bit dehydrated. But then when you're thinking about what basketball is doing, where they're gone for 4 to 5 days or a week, or in women's soccer, where Marguerite Eozaza, who was interviewed in this ESPN article, is like, hey, what happened? It wasn't when her team was on the road that they struggled. It's when they came back home after 3 games and 6 days on the road. And you're like, okay. And then learning about a story that Mitch Canham of Oregon State had to deal with, a team that's in the Supers, an independent college baseball team that made it to the top 10 as an independent school, quote unquote. In Oregon State, they were stuck on a trip where their food got canceled, their flight got canceled on a connection, and things were going crazy. UCLA, I was reading in this article about how they have different ways to manage and adapt to the soreness, learning how to recover from overall travel. It's like, wow, there's so much more that you have to deal with recovery. That's like, okay, in women's soccer, they're going to have a better schedule next year in terms of, okay, they know what the conference schedule will look like. They can manage the non-conference schedule with the conference schedule. For Mick Cronin, as we know, he came out and said so many times that the schedule is bogus. And we saw how that played out. UCLA struggled to win outside of the westernmost time zones, let alone the Pacific time zone. And then they go to the East Coast so many times, UCLA couldn't win a game, whether it was blowing against North Carolina, struggling to beat a mediocre Rutgers team. The Bruins just could not do so. And it, ironically enough, how'd their season end? A game across the country in Lexington. For the UCLA women, they played so many games on the road. 3 games, in fact, in a week on the East Coast, including a matinee affair on MLK Day, if I'm not mistaken, a non-conference game where they already had to play 2 non-conference games on the East Coast, go to Paris, go to Hawaii, and they were really good. And the only thing that probably, I think, destroyed their hopes of winning a national championship, as much as UCLA went from West Coast all the way to Florida, they just, they weren't up to UConn standard. And I don't think the travel had much to do with it, because UConn came from East Coast to West Coast back to East Coast in traveling from the Sweet 16 Elite 8 to the Final Four. And now we've seen how this has played out for UCLA baseball. They were co-Big Ten regular season champs, second in the Big Ten tournament, but they played the Big Ten tournament in the backyard of Nebraska, and they're going to sell that place out or close to it, and the Bruins lost that. They come back home, and UCLA is one of the better home teams in the country. But during the regular season, when they had a chance to clinch the Big Ten regular season, the Bruins, when all they had to do was sweep a mediocre Northwestern team, couldn't do so, or they would have been outright Big Ten champs, the 1 seed in the Big Ten tournament. UCLA softball saw what they had to do. They went all the way across the country, still didn't win the Big Ten, schedule a little bit easier, but they had to go on the road for the Supers for the first time in a very long time. And how this recovery has led to craziness, how you're like, wait a minute, they might struggle and they came back home. Or in the men's basketball case, UCLA, their biggest stretch at home came with wins over Michigan State. And then you keep going like, oh, big win over Wisconsin. Those are all games where UCLA played 3 straight weeks, close to a month at home, 7-0 on a homestand. And that went from bubble out to UCLA guaranteed in, and we're mad that they got the seed that they did. So it's the balance of how will UCLA change their approach to travel, how that's affected recruiting. UCLA already maybe going to get a kid from Florida, like I talked about earlier with Micah Smith, and how the money might play a factor. Maybe the national landscape can play a factor. Maybe just somebody wanted to come to the West Coast, play in the Rose Bowl being a factor with limited connections from, Vero Beach, other than Dodger Town or former Dodger Town, to the West Coast. It's the give and takes here, the opportunities to try and get out of the significant debt. But then next thing you know, UCLA baseball, where they're going to play their home games the next couple of years. What's that situation looking like? But they play in a conference where the baseball team, the softball team, should dominate for years to come. An opportunity for the women's basketball team to be 1-2 every single year until proven otherwise in their own conference. But then the football team, they're going to have to step it up in recruiting, in NIL support, in attendance, in fan support. Men's basketball is going to have to learn how to win outside the West Coast, out of the westernmost time zones, Pacific Standard Time, the Mountain Time Zone, everything. What is that going to look like going to the future? And UCLA navigated it, and in different teams, different sports, sometimes the opposite occurred. The team traveling played worse or better. And you saw the UCLA women's soccer team got ousted early in the NCAA tournament, but the men also ousted early, differing results on the road and at home. Football, most travel miles, struggled early with a big travel schedule, and then did a lot better late, a little less travel, get a good winning streak. So that'll be something to look forward to heading into the offseason, how that transforms their recovery, their everything they go with nutrition, strength, and conditioning. And if that changes heading into year two, now that these coaches are building schedules where they're not going to travel before conference play. They will not go to any they probably won't go anywhere outside of the UCLA women's basketball team's crazy schedule last year. Not going to see something like that, but it does pay off in a national recruiting ability. They just have to be able to secure the commitments and keep them and bring them to UCLA while they have that opportunity like the UCLA football team does. Next, we're going to talk about the football team because their times have been revealed for the first few games. It's been a little older news, but what do we think about a late start time, an early start time, everything in between as we start to learn more about this UCLA 2025 football schedule? The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers a highlight-worthy performance with major momentum shifts, can't-miss moments, and whether it's a game-winning shot, a breakout player, there's never been a better time than now to get in on the action because FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game. The finals are right around the corner. You're like, wow, what's going on? It's the Thunder. It's the Pacers. Well, right now with those player props, you're going to enjoy before tip-off live. There's performance trends, same game parlays, and fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. Who's going to show up in the biggest moments, right? You're like, I think SGA, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, is going to have some big-time fourth-quarter numbers, and maybe you're like, hey, let's get in on some player props. Maybe you want to go with that, or Tyrese Halliburton, or it's like the Pacers have had a lot of late-game comebacks, and you want a live game, a little parlay there to hedge your bet or double down. Check it out with FanDuel, because if you're new, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com, place your first $5 bet, and if it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. Cruising on, second segment, we're talking a little bit about the UCLA football times that have been released. When you're going to get to the Rose Bowl on August 30th, when the Bruins are hosting the Utah Utes, a game that could truly define how the start of the season goes and how we look about this season. Or when they're going to go to UNLV, when they're playing Michigan State, or what about a Friday night kickoff against the team that we're not going to go watch, right? In general, like the fan base is not going to show up if they're playing New Mexico on a Friday, right? Right. Well, that's just the honest opinion. I think that should change, but that's just how it is. UCLA gets an 8 p.m. kickoff in the Rose Bowl August 30th. And I believe if you're listening and watching know, a day kickoff, a morning kickoff during the month of August, let alone early September in Pasadena, is awful. It is awful. It might be cool if it's early morning tailgates and it's a little cooler, but if it's not a big name opponent, if you don't get to have football and tailgate all day, okay, that's rough. And it's hot, like miserable when the sun's out there. It takes a lot for it to cool off by the time fall is officially in season. And we're already, week 4, week 5 into the season. The UCLA students finally get to campus to start their fall quarter before it gets cool. So an 8 p.m. kickoff, I know as an LA person, as a SoCal kid, we're not used to these 8 p.m., 8:30 kickoffs. That doesn't happen, all right? What is this stuff that starts at 8:30 on the East Coast or 9 p.m. in some cases? If you watch some of these games that get delayed as late as they do with television, and they're ending later than midnight. That doesn't happen on the West Coast. I know UCLA played Oregon at 8 p.m. That was a weird game. And then the next time they're playing Iowa at 6 p.m. on a Friday. And those are very weird, unique experiences, which are equally tough to get to the Rose Bowl and watch, whether it's staying late or getting there on a Friday or an earlier kickoff. Those are unique times to get to the Rose Bowl. But that early in the season, a hot game, You're going to watch all the premier college football games. You can watch every single one, tailgates, have as much fun as possible, respectively, of course, and then get into the stadium still with plenty of time to spare to see the opening kickoff. I feel like that's a perfect week one opportunity to watch all of college football, which is what we almost all do that opening weekend. Cherish the moments with your tailgating Bruins, whether it's eating the barbecue, having some snacks, having desserts, whatever it is, down in a drink or two. And then you go in and you're not just red hot and you're not just beat red like I am from sitting in the sun all day. I mean, you might be, but it'll be much cooler and you can sit and enjoy the game. The only thing red will be the Utah Utes jerseys, or at least the ones that the fans will bring in, and their faces after UCLA beats them week one. Hopefully, right? But at 8 p.m., that's a little rough, but a night game where the sun will be down is a huge thing for the Bruins. Now, I just wonder how many people will stick all the way through an all-day, extremely hot tailgate. That's another question. Then playing UNLV on the road, a 5 p.m. contest. I wonder how many Bruins are going to make it to a short Vegas trip for an easy road trip going to see one of the newer stadiums in the NFL, which is supposed to be pretty solid. One of the hardest tickets to get into if you're either a Raiders fan or if you're a visiting fan to check out the Raiders or who they're playing in Las Vegas, because UNLV has their own facility and their own locker rooms inside that stadium, which is absolutely nuts. They never really sell it out, but it's a premier state-of-the-art stadium. And it's indoors, so you're not going to be burning hot. That's not a worry. 5 p.m., it'll be fun to, all right, you stay up late, and then next thing you know, the next week, it'll be a game that ends right when week one begins, if you're thinking about week two. And then you get a nationally televised game. So 2 nationally televised games, one that only West Coast fans will watch, another one, maybe a little bit of intrigue if UCLA can knock off Utah. And with Dan Mullen at UNLV, a sneaky tough game, but hopefully the Bruins can get that one done. And then UCLA will play New Mexico on a Friday. So after playing UNLV, they play New Mexico on a Friday, which is a bit of a shocker. You're like, man, why couldn't we get a Saturday game? Because we all know that Friday game will not be the best attended game in the Rose Bowl. It could easily be one of the worst games. You're going to have people take pictures. But hopefully by that time, UCLA will be 3-0. And then when the students are back in session, the fans are believing in the hype. When they play Penn State early in October, that is a game that gets the buzz. Hopefully the Utah game does. New Mexico game on a Friday, that is about as rough as it gets. That's just how it is. A Friday game against New Mexico, also with a new coach. Think of all these teams with new things going on. UCLA, a lot of new coaching staff, not new coaches, and a lot of new players. You've got Utah that's trying to finally get itself out of the Cam Rising era. What's Kyle Whittingham going to do? Is this the end of his Utah tenure? UNLV with a new coach. You've got New Mexico with a new coach. And then you bring in Michigan State on the schedule, and they've got a 9 a.m. game. Obviously, UCLA gets that noon kickoff Eastern time, 9 a.m. here, which I love when it comes to podcasting and watching, because by the middle of the day, you're like, all right, we watched the game, and this was fun. Not the worst thing to be a West Coast sports fan watching your West Coast team play a team in the Eastern time zone with a game that starts at 12 in East Lansing. All right. Not the worst, but those are where UCLA will potentially, or those are their 3 to 4 games that have had times announced. Not the best in some cases. The Friday game is not going to do great things for attendance. That's just honest. But hopefully with the 3-0 start, when that Penn State game comes around, if UCLA works its way to being unbeaten, that will be a huge game that gets primetime looks and potentially will be an early test for UCLA against Penn State. And maybe they can challenge the Nittany Lions, who are a preseason favorite to win the Big Ten, be in that CFP, be in that top 4 that can get a bye. That's what the Nittany Lions are. That will be probably the premier home game for UCLA in their Big Ten slate, with a new team coming to town that we just have not seen. And that'll be fun. Next, we're going to highlight the newest additions to the UCLA Athletics Hall of Fame class, announced about a week ago. We'll talk about them briefly, say the names, what their bios are, and we'll talk about it next on Locked On UCLA. All right, to wrap up this pod, we're talking about the 9 newest members of the UCLA Hall of Fame class in 2025. And here they are as follows. They'll be honored in the fall. The Bruins took a long time to announce it in that day-long process. Here are your 9 newest Bruins to the Hall of Fame class. You got Tracy Milburn-Bailey from women's soccer, Brandon Crawford, yes, that Brandon Crawford, Mike Franks from men's tennis, Cindy Gallagher, women's swimming and diving, Jason Capono, men's basketball, Brittany McCullough, women's gymnastics, Kimberly Poe, women's tennis, Sheena Johnson-Tostel with women's track and field, and then Lisa Willis, women's basketball. All right, and what this class apparently brings, according to the UCLA release, 5 national championships, 20 All-America honors, and including some of which who are multi-World Series champions, Brandon Crawford, NBA champions, Capono, Olympic medalist in Sheena Johnson, and a Wimbledon champion in Kimberly Poe. All right, so a lot of established collegiate All-Americans or All-America honors, and then players who went on to the next level and still dominated, were a part of championship teams, or won the biggest or best tournaments or championships in their respective sports. So these are all-time Bruins, right? Sometimes you're like, why is it taking so long for so-and-so to get honored? Well, it's a rigorous process. And the Bruins, I think, have done quite a job at getting these players here. So let's go briefly over each one of them. You've got Tracy Milburn-Bailey, and you're like, when did she play? From 1998 to 2000. All-America honors, was a second-team honoree as a forward from the Coaches Association in 2000, Pac-10 Player of the Year, a Honda Award finalist, 13 goals, 6 assists, and helped lead her team, the Bruins, to their first ever College Cup and their first national championship game in 2000. So she was a first-team All Pac-10 each year with UCLA, 11 goals as a sophomore, and now has gone on to do more broadcasting and is now with her husband, Toby Bailey, in the UCLA Athletic Hall of Fame. So a husband-wife duo in the Hall of Fame, but she deserved it in her own right from the late 90s to the early 2000s, taking the UCLA women's soccer program to new heights, which has now eventually become more of a regular member in the College Cup and won a pair, including that dramatic win over North Carolina a few years ago. Then you've got Brandon Crawford. I know he's a beloved Bruin, but as a Dodger fan, a many Dodger fans, like, I don't know. But Brandon Crawford, a 2-time World Series champion, 3-time All-Star, 4-time Gold Glover with the Giants, won the gold in the World Baseball Classic with USA in 2017 when every fan in Dodger blue was saying USA, USA, cheering on Crawford to win when he got a big hit in the World Baseball Classic championship game against Puerto Rico. But as a Bruin, Crawford, freshman All-America honors from Baseball America, you've got All Pac-10 selection in 2007. His college career, 319 batting average, 230 hits, 20 home runs, and 136 RBIs. And think, they're playing about 50-ish games. So for a guy that played from 2006 to 2009, 2008, if you put 3 seasons together, which are still long seasons in college baseball, in the end, you put it together, that's about a full year. That's like a superstar level year. 230 hits, 20 bombs, 136 RBIs, 3rd in UCLA in career triples with 13, won a Silver Slugger, 4th in the MVP voting. He's done quite a bit in his career at UCLA. And also, just like Tracy Milburn-Bailey, helped brought a UCLA program to the next level. The Bruins hadn't won a national championship, and he wasn't a part of that, but he was the first UCLA team members to bring the Bruins to 3 straight NCAA regional appearances. First time in school history. So that's where you get these Bruins coming in. All right, they took them into this new era where they eventually won national championships and saw some of the best successes even after their college careers. Mike Franks, from the mid to late 50s from men's tennis, 2-time All-American, was the #1 UCLA singles player through his 3 seasons, was part of a team championship in 1956, one of those many championships the UCLA program in their athletics history has won overall. And here they are. He went with UCLA 30-3 in his 3 seasons and won a share of the conference title each year, and eventually got to the 4th round of some Grand Slam tournaments in the U.S. Open and went to the 3rd round of Wimbledon, a junior member of the U.S. Davis Cup team, and won the doubles championship and was continually a superstar. All right. Then you've got Cindy Gallagher, who was a coach from the late 80s to 2019, a student athlete from 79 to 83 in women's swimming and diving, 38 years at UCLA from playing, coaching, head coach, and was the winningest coach in program history in dual meets, 202 wins, 107 losses and 2 ties, Pac-10 titles, multiple top 10 finishes at the NCAA championships. It was a multi-winner of the Pac-10 Coach of the Year award. 11 Olympians, 21 conference championships, 91 All-Americans. And you're like, wow, think about that. She coached the first ever individual swimming champion, and that eventually won the Olympic gold, All-American herself. So a career Bruin. You got players who set the standard for the program, and then you got a career Bruin in Cindy Gallagher. Jason Capono, early 2000s UCLA basketball, 2000, 2003, third all-time scorer in UCLA men's basketball history, top 10 in Pac-12 scoring, and he finished with just over 2,000 points, 2,095, tied with Reggie Miller, 16 and a half points per game. Was part of a team that made it to the Sweet 16 in 2000, 2001, 2002, freshman of the year in the Pac, and was the leader in three-point field goal percentage, 47%. Boy, would the Bruins love to have a guy like him on their team this year to be able to shoot the ball. Was a top 10 three-point shooter in percentage, three-pointers made, attempted free throw percentage, field goals made, minutes per game, and points per game, top 10 in all of those, and was a second-round NBA draft pick by the Cavs, and eventually won an NBA title with the Miami Heat. Sounds like a great Bruin from what he was able to do. Then you got Brittany McCullough, women's gymnastics, late 2010s to 2011, standout. This is what the UCLA release has to say about her. She was four-time All-Pac-10 honoree in multiple awards, multiple ways. 2008 Pac-10 Freshman of the Year, regionals, NCAA floor exercise titles out in 2010. It was a part of a UCLA team that won the NCAA title, team title in 2010 with multiple Pac-10 team titles. All right. And eventually still was a NICU nurse at UCLA for 3 years, and eventually became a pediatric nurse practitioner going to school at UCLA. So a career Bruin in athletics and in professional life after that as well. You've got Kimberly Poe, more tennis from the 90s, 1990 to 1991, was very successful on the WTA tour and had one of the highest rankings ever of a UCLA women's tennis player, 6th in doubles, 14 in singles, and won multiple Pac-10 doubles titles, and was able to win a mixed doubles title in Wimbledon in 2000 and was runner-up in women's doubles in the U.S. Open in 2001. So a successful tennis player for Kimberly Poe. Sheena Johnson Tosta from women's track and field, early 2000s, 01 to 04, multi-Olympian, two-time Olympian, two-time NCAA champion, 10-time All-American, won the NCAA outdoor hurdle titles, 400 meters in 03 and in 04, and set the world best time, a collegiate record of just over 53 and a half seconds at the 400-meter hurdles. So that is eliteness, elite greatness right there from Sheena. And then to wrap up this list, you got Lisa Willis, a women's basketball player from 03 to 06, MVP of the Pac-10 tournament in 2006, and UCLA, who won their first ever conference tournament title only in the mid-2010, or excuse me, mid-2000s over there, was a player who was an honorable mention, AP All-American, third-team All-American women's basketball news service in 06, won gold with Team USA in the World University Games, selected by the LA Sparks as the 5th pick in the 06 WNBA draft, led the WNBA in three-pointers in 08, and was continuing her coaching career after that. That is your elite coaching staff and players and career Bruins, your 9-player list of UCLA Bruins to make the Hall of Fame class in 2025. So hands up, Bruins fans, 8 clap time, celebrate them, and get excited and ready to roll. Okay, that's going to do it. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, UCLA. UCLA, fight, fight, fight. This has been Locked On UCLA. Zach signing off. Go Bruins.